and welcome to the TPAC session, breakout session for the Web Install API. I'm Peter Conn. You can find this presentation along with the draft explainer I keep on mentioning at the address on the screen. So github.com/PECONN/web-install-explainer. I'll leave that URL up on for the next few slides, just so people don't miss it. Cool. So first I'll just have a brief run through of how the session is going to go. After the intro, we'll have a section covering what our thoughts are so far. This will basically be a rundown of kind of what's in that draft explainer. After that, we'll open it up to a discussion. I reckon it would probably go a bit easier, a bit quicker if people hold their thoughts and comments off until the discussion. As it is, I reckon the bit covering our thoughts so far will probably take about 15 minutes. And so yeah, the lion's share of this breakout will be everyone chatting. So who am I? I am Peter Conn, Peter Edmund Conn, if you're wondering where the E in my username comes from. I've been working at Google for about 5 years now on the Chrome for Android team. Within that, I'm on the mobile web install team. I'm the tech lead for Chrome custom tabs and for trusted web activities. And the mobile web install team is also responsible for web APKs. So what is the purpose of this session? So we've got an idea about this web install API. It's a very, very rough idea at the moment, and the explainer draft I linked to here and I've mentioned before is also in its very early stages. So we basically want to get your feedback. Do you think we need this? If so, how do you think it should work? What are your concerns? So overall, this is all very exploratory. What is this API about? Simply put, it's an API that would allow a website to request the installation of another website. It differs a bit from before install prompt, which some of you may know about, because before install prompt only works to install the site that the user is currently on. I do say request to install another website. You can request to install yourself. It's just that seems to be subsumed by the requesting installation. So our thoughts so far. There are two kind of big use cases we can see for this. The first being web app directories, such as the ones I've listed. These are directories and catalogs, sites that list web apps that potentially provide other kind of metadata about them, reviews, ratings, and so on. These do exist today, but are somewhat limited by the experience they can offer the user. Second, this API would provide a kind of unified place for a publisher who has multiple different apps, multiple different experiences, a unified place for them to direct users to go and install everything. Go into a little bit more detail about each of these. So why app? Why do we want to make app directories better? Well, I believe that if we make web app directories stronger, this in turn strengthens the web. Kind of better discoverability of web apps makes them more appealing to developers, and adding ratings and reviews will make them more useful to users. Yes, so many users, especially the younger ones, have been trained to look for apps in app stores, and at the moment, the web doesn't really have a good place for these users to go. If the web doesn't offer something comparable, it is somewhat at risk of becoming less relevant. And developers and businesses do want to bring their experiences to mobile in a safe and ephemeral way, but currently have to do this at the expense of discoverability. And why unified install pages? So on the second use case, we can imagine a publisher with multiple projects, say, for example, Adobe or Coral. They tend to put their products on different origins, which makes a lot of sense. It's better for the user in ways I'll get into in the next slide. and it means that different teams can work on different things. With this API, it'll be easier for such a developer to link their multiple apps and let users install what they want. It also gives the users a place to kind of check for their current entitlements, their current subscriptions, and can serve as a product management center. So yeah, the reason we like this is it encourages publishers to split their apps into different domains, which in turn gives stronger origin isolation and more granular permissions. So those are the benefits we think such an API would bring. However, we, and presumably you too, have a few concerns. We can broadly split these concerns into 3 different groups based on the 3 different kind of actors in the situation. We should protect the user from the catalog. We should, so I'm going to use catalog now to encompass both of the 2 use cases I mentioned previously. So we want to protect the user from the catalog. We want to protect the user from the installed website. And we may want to prevent the target website from the catalog. So obviously allowing any website to install any other website would be a nightmare for users. The home screen would be filled up with random websites near instantly. So we need a way to restrict this capability. We could create this website is allowed to install other websites with permission. You could imagine this is a permission few websites would need, and it would be reasonably easy to communicate to the user what's going on. We could require that a website, we could require that triggering this API involves some browser UI saying a prompt, do you want to install this? We could also make sure that installation is not triggered unless there's a user gesture on the page. And finally, we could use some heuristic to try to figure out the trustability of a website before we let it install other things. And it's worth noting that kind of none of these are mutually exclusive. None of these are what we've settled on. As I said, it's all very much up in the air and exploratory at the moment. Protecting the user from the target website. So browsers may have web installability criteria, and we don't want to create some sort of fragmented situation where if you install a website one way, it must pass certain criteria, and if you install it in another, it doesn't need to. The big issue this raises is that we will probably need to visit a website before it, which in turn has implications for kind of user privacy and user data. We're doing things with their cookie jar potentially, or adding state to their history. And protecting the target website from the catalog. So Chrome DevRel a while ago created a game called Prox, basically to show off what can be done with web development. I think it was web workers they were kind of showing off at the time. And within a couple of hours, it had already been copied and uploaded to app stores behind a price tag. So we can't really stop people from copying the front end of a website. But what we may want to prevent is a nasty web catalog linking to my genuine website. So I am quite unsure about this, but potentially we could require that a web app lists the stores that can install it. Right, so to counteract the nebulous cloud of concerns we've just been stumbling through, I've come up with 3 possible ways this API could work for the user. These aren't set in stone, they're more open to suggestions, and we're open to suggestions, and these are just for illustration. I should mention that these mocks are all based on Android because I'm just more used to working around with mocks for Android. These could all work on desktop as well. Sorry. Cool. So first, seamless integration. This is the most minimal and the most seamless. The user presses install and magically the web app is installed on the device. It would definitely be the nicest from the point of view of the catalog or the publisher. but the scariest in terms of permissions. The user at no point during this sees the URL of the app that they've installed, and they potentially may never do so, because on Android, if you open an installed web app, there's no top bar to show you what your origin is. We've got browser prompt. So this is a little similar to what happens with before install prompt. The user would hit install, would get some browser UI that shows the name of the app, maybe shows some more details, shows the origin of the URL, and then the user would have to interact with this to install it. We could potentially gate this behind a user gesture so that websites don't kind of spam users with it. And finally, we've got try before you buy. This is a slightly different approach. The idea is that the user hits install on the catalog, and then they're taken to the page, but in a slightly different browser UI. So we can see here, there's no Omnibox. There's a nice big install button, kind of really highlighting it for the user. And there's also a close button, so the user can quickly return to the catalog if they want to, if they've navigated kind of around in it. They also get the opportunity to try the web app, see whether or not they like it before they go and install it. Cool. So finally, a list of open questions. Should the website know where the installer came from? This would definitely help with app catalog monetization. Presumably, the monetization model would be apps get paid for promotions, get paid for sending traffic, which then goes and installs. So there'd be some way that a website needs to know who caused its installation. We could potentially just use referrer, or we could do something more complex. Informing the directory of the outcome. Should the directory know if the user went through with installation? This could be used as a signal for web app quality, so the directory knows which web apps the users actually go on and install, and could also be used for the directory to customize its UI. So when the user returns to it, the install button may be grayed out or may be changed into a launch button. And on that topic, the biggest of the outstanding questions, checking for existing installs. So you can imagine one of these directories, the user's gone, they've gone and installed a few things, and they come back a day or so later. The directory would want to customize its UI, so maybe it will just ignore the apps that the user has already installed, or maybe they'll be grayed out, maybe the button will say launch instead. This is a bit similar to an API we already have, which is called get installed related apps. So this allows a website to detect the installation status of up to 3 native applications, or potentially PWAs. This would be a big privacy concern if any more than kind of 3 apps are shown, are accessible, because it would lead to user fingerprinting. Potentially, we could let the directory just see the apps that it has installed itself, or yeah, I don't have a definitive answer on this one. Cool. So that was my part of the presentation. Now for your thoughts. We've got a few prompts. Should we do this? Have we missed any concerns? Can you think of any alternative user flows? And what do you think about the open questions? Cool. Please discuss.